12.
Девушка, вы слышите, как она орет там за дверью?
Я что должна сделать-то?
Где милиция?
Чего так разговариваете?
А как мне дверь-то открыть, там ее убьют сегодня?
Полиция приедет, не надо материться.
On the night of January 13th to 14th, 2020, the echoing corridors of a dormitory on Leningradsky Prospect were filled with a woman's screams. It was around 3 in the morning. The screams grew louder, more desperate. A girl was pleading for help, and the neighbors began calling 112, begging for the police to be sent, but they never arrived. Today, we will discuss one of the most shocking cases in recent years. Although it happened in 2020, people are still talking about it today. For more than 3 hours, a defenseless girl was beaten to death in her own apartment, while the police were in no hurry to come. The outcome is tragic. All the neighbors heard those unbearable screams, yet no one could do anything. Why was this girl being murdered for over 3 hours? And how did her killer manage to avoid criminal responsibility? Before we start, let me remind you to like this video, not for the horrible story, but for the work I've put into it. Also, leave a comment. It helps with the promotion of my videos. For more than 4 years, this story has terrified not just the residents of Kemerovo, but the entire country. But let's start from the beginning. Vera Pekhteleva was born on September 24, 1997, in the city of Kizilevsk, Kemerovo region, Russia. She studied at a lyceum where they wrote creative personality before graduation, and her name appeared on the website under Pride of the Lyceum. According to the official website of the educational institution, Vera participated in regional and city events and won first place at the Rainbow Festival. From her early biography, it's known that she was involved in vocal performances with the Kisilevsky Avosky group. Her parents divorced when Pekhteleva was still young, but she maintained a warm relationship with her father, Evgeny. She often visited his new family and spent holidays there. Her parents adored their daughter, sincerely rejoicing in her musical successes. When Vera graduated from school, her mother, Oksana, thought she would enter a university of culture. However, Pekhteleva unexpectedly changed her mind and applied to the Kuzbas State Technical University in Kemerovo. A student of the Faculty of Economic Security, she studied well and dreamed of a career in the anti-corruption department. An artistic, charming girl, she was a creative personality and participated in many events. Beautiful and charismatic, it seemed like her whole life was ahead of her. Now, let's talk about the second, no less important figure in this case, Vladislav Kanyus. Vladislav was born on August 4, 1996. Little is known about Kanyus's biography. His nationality, place of work, and education are not detailed, but it's clear that his family life was troubled. His father committed suicide with a double-barreled hunting rifle, reportedly after being caught stealing and facing criminal charges. Vladislav has a brother, Stanislav, who moved to Novosibirsk. Stan said he never noticed any cruelty or destructive behavior in his brother. However, Vera's parents had a poor opinion of the young man. Her father, Evgeny Pekhteleva, called his daughter's ex-boyfriend rotten blood, and her mother referred to Kanyus as a monster. Vladislav, who dropped out of school after the 9th grade, was a completely different type of person compared to Vera. He abused alcohol and had a criminal record for robbery. The young man started dating Vera in 2017. The parents of the young people lived in the same house in Kizilevsk, Kemerovo region, and had known each other for a long time. The couple spent time together at house parties, hookah lounges, and entertainment venues. From time to time, Kanyus posted romantic photos of the two on VKontakte. The love that sparked between Vera and Vladislav followed the classic good girl and bad boy pattern, but good girls are often drawn to opposites, hoping he's not really like that he's kind at heart, and that he can be changed. It's a timeless plot that usually ends poorly, but the unemployed and overall unwilling to work. Kanyus saw Vera as a set of perfections. She was beautiful, smart, and had money he could dip into, and he did, regularly forcing the girl to support him. Vlad never came to family holidays, and he wasn't in any photos that Vera posted online. It was as if she was hiding him, her mother recalls. The woman admits that it seemed Vlad saw in Vera a way to improve his life. The girl had good prospects. Her parents planned to help her with an apartment, and her future career was looking bright. She would definitely have built a career after university. The relationship between Vera and Vladislav was tense. Kanyus abused alcohol and clearly had no intention of changing. Finally, in November 2019, after 2 years of such toxic relationships, the girl decided to break up with Vlad. However, her boyfriend was categorically opposed to this decision. Kanyus decided that the girl would either be his or dead. And this wasn't an impulsive emotional outburst, but a cold, calculated plan. In the testimony of Kanyus's brother, this fact is mentioned. Vladislav said he would kill Vera, but the brother didn't take these words seriously, dismissing them as mere rhetoric. However, considering some stories, one might assume that even if the brother of the potential criminal had gone to the police with a report, he would have been sent away. As practice shows, even if the victim herself reports threats, law enforcement often doesn't respond. It's very important that Vladislav had spoken about his intention to harm the girl in advance because, in court, he claimed that he had no intention of killing Vera. So Kanyus plotted a brutal revenge. On January 12, 2020, he called Vera and suggested she come by to pick up her things. They had rented an apartment together in a dormitory at 28 Leningradsky Prospect, and after the breakup, Vera moved into a student dormitory. And Vera went, entering the apartment from which she would never leave. It was from this apartment that she recorded her last voice message to a friend who was supposed to help her move. The first such message was sent around 5 p.m.
Так, Зай, ну смотри, я еще тут, я сейчас собираю вещи. Так, всего. Ну, в принципе, смотри, я думаю, мне полчаса еще хватит. На такси я доеду. Ну, да, надеюсь, в 6 где-то я буду в общаге.
The second voice message to her friend came from Vlad, where he asked her not to come.
Кира, пожалуйста, я тебя прошу серьезно, отстань, отдохни пока что сейчас элементарно. Мне нужен этот человек в данный момент, и она со мной находится вместе. Мне это важно и нужно. Хватит, пожалуйста, не надо ни в чем помогать. Я и сам абсолютно во всем сегодня помогу.
At 3 a.m., the neighbors on the floor were awakened by terrible screams coming from apartment 738. A witness who called the police described the scene as a massacre. The screams were so loud that about 15 people gathered in the corridor near the apartment. Among them was Kanyus's brother. He immediately remembered Vladislav's words and realized they needed to break down the door, which was strong and made of metal. They began looking for tools and repeatedly dialing the emergency number. 112.
И нам бы полицию вызвать, а то соседи какая-то бойня происходит, девушка орет прямо истерически.
Вы за сотрудником полиции передали, направят экипаж для разбирателей.
Помогите, спасите, орет благим матом. У меня тут соседи даже вышли уже из других квартир. Стучимся, дверь не открывается, она кричит «помогите», и все.
But what was happening in Kanyus's apartment at that moment? It seems the tyrant hoped to reason with the girl and achieve reconciliation. On the evening of January 13th, he met Vera romantically, bought her a liqueur, himself 6 liters of beer, and a bottle of vodka. But reconciliation failed. The girl wasn't willing to continue the relationship, so the alcohol-fueled guy attacked Vera. Even while giving testimony, Kanyus assured that before strangling her, he hit the girl 4 times, and only with his palm, and not even with full force. He claimed that she allegedly hit her head on a cabinet by herself. However, forensic examination data tell a completely different story. The brute inflicted no fewer than 56 bodily injuries on Vera, methodically torturing her for 3.5 hours. From the blows, the girl's nose was broken. On the diagram drawn by forensic experts, it is evident that the sadist left no part of the victim's body unharmed. The pathologist was faced with a horrifying scene. Bruises, abrasions, cuts, and torn wounds. Almost half of the blows were directed at the girl's face. The enraged torturer tried to cause as much pain as possible. He didn't just use his hands and feet to strike. Heavy objects came into play. Then Kanyus grabbed a knife. This is all confirmed by 2 forensic examinations. It was established that Kanyus, after cutting Vera's body twice with a knife, decided to take another, sharper knife to inflict 5 more wounds. No, he didn't intend to kill the girl immediately. He intentionally prolonged the process. In his testimony during interrogation, he complained that Vera was biting his fingers. The victim tried to break free from the beast's grip to escape the apartment that had become a deadly trap. Neighbors gathered at the doors heard the girl banging against the iron door, unsuccessfully trying to open it. Meanwhile, Kanyus was dragging his victim back, continuing the bloody rampage. This raises the question, where was the police? The answer is simple. They were not hurrying.
Оператор 112.
Девушка, ну а где экипаж?
Я переключала вас на полицию. Что они вам сказали?
Они нам ничего не ответили, они отключились.
102 спрашивайте. 102.
It's horrifying to listen to the audio recordings of calls to the 112 service made on January 14th, 2020, starting from 4 a.m. Neighbors literally cut the phone lines and begged to hurry up the police officers. Here's one of the dialogues recorded.
Оператор 112.
Девушка, вы слышите, как она орет там за дверью?
Я что должна сделать-то?
Где милиция?
Чего так разговариваете?
А как где дверь-то открыта, там ее убьют сегодня?
Полиция приедет, не надо материться.
For an hour and a half, at least 7 such calls were made to the 112 service. Vera's screams were so loud that the service operator could hear them. But the operator was more concerned about the manner of communication than someone's life. Callers were being transferred directly to the duty station, but no one answered and simply disconnected. This raises a new question. What was happening at the duty station at that time? Were all the police cars out on calls, or were they en route to the scene?
Пытались уже, считай, с 5 часов туда отправить хоть кого-то. Ленинский говорит, у нас некому поехать, все без бензина, охрана. Колесо у них спустила Ильичкину, я звонила, говорила, что Ленинский зашивается. Ехать вообще некому на сигнал. А про этот сигнал нет. Там шум, обычная драка в квартире.
The unit at Leningradsky Prospect, the major, did not send anyone, finding no one to dispatch. However, by 5:10 a.m., he sent police officers to find an old man's dead body. Meanwhile, Vera was screaming and calling for help. At 5:25, the major decided to take a short break, got tired. He was replaced by a captain. The captain also received the signal about the massacre on Leningradsky and took no action. Subsequently, the major tried to explain his inaction by saying that the unit ran out of gas, but there was gas. This was revealed immediately after the rampage over Vera and the dialogue with the senior officer of the unit. The indictment states that the unit had gas, and if they didn't, Balashov should have taken appropriate measures to resolve the situation. Vera could have been saved. There was time. The sadist wasn't in a hurry. And suddenly, the screams in apartment number 738 ceased. Dead silence descended. This was Kanyus putting an end to the torture, first delivering a brutal blow to the girl's head, causing a cranial injury, and then strangling the victim with a cord from an iron. And here, attention should be paid to a very important fact noted by the forensic examination. Death occurred not only from strangulation, as the criminal tries to assure in his testimony to soften the punishment, but also due to the inflicted injuries. This means that Kanyus didn't just strangle Vera, he tortured her to death. At this moment, the neighbors finally found a metal crowbar. Men began to break down the door. Forcing it open, they saw the motionless body of the girl. Blood was smeared on the floor and walls. The apartment was a real massacre.
Здравствуйте. 1,5 часа назад вызывали службу. До сих пор никто не приехал. Своими силами взломали дверь. Девушка уже мертва. Наши действия. Что с девушкой? Девушка уже мертва. 1,5 часа вызывали службы для спасения. Девушка орала: «Помогите, спасите». Никто не помог и не спас.
My faith in law enforcement has shaken, says one of the witnesses to these events. My wife and I are sure that if the police had arrived, the girl wouldn't have lost her life. And what's telling is that when the duty station learned that there was no one left to save, a unit was immediately found. And they had gas too. After the tragedy, the operator was bitterly crying, but her tears were not for the deceased girl. She was worried about her boss's ruined career. The most horrifying part of this story is that Vera could have been saved.
Казалось же, давайте хоть кого-нибудь. Бесполезно. Охрана какие-то сработки, потом мне колесо спустило. Понимаешь, я ему сколько раз звонила, ни одна тварь не приехала. Сволочи.
When it became clear that the girl had already lost her life, the major couldn't hold back his emotions. His colleague major was personally distressed by the obvious negligence that led to a person's death, which carries a sentence of up to 5 years. However, charges were somehow brought against 2 senior officers for damage resulting from negligence, a statute that allows for a fine to avoid punishment. Moreover, the indictment didn't forget to mention that both the major and the captain have mitigating circumstances: minor children. This means that the police officers have a chance to receive only symbolic punishment for the damage. Vladislav Kanyus could have received a light charge, not corresponding to the nature of the crime, in which he is accused of ordinary manslaughter without cruelty and torture of the victim. The punishment under this article is much lighter. If Kanyus is given a sentence at the lower end, he will serve only 6 years. He will be 30 years old, in the prime of his life, a robber and a cruel criminal, ready for new deeds, and he might even be released earlier on parole. Why do the investigative authorities show such mercy to the killer? There's a theory that the degree of Kanyus's guilt was intentionally downplayed to make it easier to prosecute the major and captain. The whole country watched this case without exaggeration. The story only gained resonance a year later when people started talking about it. By that time, Vladislav Kanyus's case was already in court, and the case against the police officers who didn't respond in time was only being considered. Relatives feared that those guilty of the young girl's death might be convicted under light articles, meaning the punishment would be insignificant. Possibly, public resonance played a role. After the first court session, the case against the police officers was returned to the prosecution for reclassification to a more severe article, from simple negligence resulting in death. This is why it's important to like and comment on such videos, news, and everything else. It's thanks to your activity that more people notice these cases. It's important to bring such cases to light, and you can contribute by spending just a few seconds to like and write any comment. Now, let's return to our story. The court heard the testimonies of witnesses, the forensic expert, and the defendant himself. It was revealed that Vera died from a combination of injuries. More than 100 wounds, bruises, hematomas, and cut wounds were counted on her body. It turned out that the criminal strangled the girl several times. After the first time, Vera was still alive. Kanyus claimed that the conflict was initiated by Vera herself. She insulted Vlad. He became angry and hit her several times. She responded. A fight broke out. When the girl was already lying on the floor, Kanyus saw an iron and wrapped its cord around her neck. He wanted her to fall asleep for about 15 minutes. He explained his actions to the defendant. When I started talking to her about our relationship, I suggested that we reconcile, and I also said that I knew she was communicating with another guy. The conflict began between us. She didn't like it. After that, she began to insult me with obscene language and started hitting me. Specifically, she hit me no fewer than 5 times with her leg in the groin area, and at least 8 times with her palm on the face. I didn't feel any pain from the hits, but when she kicked me between the legs, I felt physical pain. So Vera started hitting me first. This made me angry. Specifically, I was angry that she denied the fact that she was seeing another guy. The judge read Kanyus's interrogation testimony. On July 28, 2022, Judge Kemrovsky of the Regional Court pronounced his decision. Vladislav Kanyus was sentenced to 17 years instead of the 23 years the prosecution had requested, with the punishment to be served in a strict regime colony. Additionally, compensation was assigned to the parents in the amount of 4 million rubles. In his final words, the criminal insisted that the victim provoked him herself and that he did not want a tragic ending. However, the young man was found guilty only of murder. Vera's relatives tried to appeal the sentence, but the 5th Appellate Court of General Jurisdiction in Novosibirsk left it unchanged. Another very important and interesting question remains: what happened to the officers who decided not to respond to the call? Initially, 3 officers were simply reprimanded and fined. The public and relatives were so shocked by this punishment that they immediately began writing complaints to various authorities, contacting bloggers and asking for publicity. It took incredible efforts to initiate a new criminal case against the police officers. 3 female officers from the duty station of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Kemerovo were prosecuted under this new case. To avoid responsibility, one of the on-duty officers later became pregnant, but the case still moved forward. These news couldn't have been called good. No verdicts or punishments would bring Vera back to life. Nevertheless, the prosecutor requested actual sentences for all 5 police officers. Unexpectedly, the prosecutor requested actual sentences, meaning fairly strict punishments, says Vera's uncle. Vera's mother, Oksana Pekhteleva, had already lost hope for justice, and the defendant believed he would escape punishment. The laughter immediately subsided, as at the beginning of the session they behaved very casually, thinking they would get away with it, says Oksana Pekhteleva. The major and captain, who didn't respond to the call, were sentenced to 3.5 years in a general regime colony each. 3 dispatchers who ignored the call were sentenced to between 2.5 to 3.5 years in a general regime colony. One of them happened to become pregnant, so her punishment was mitigated. Vera's relatives feared until the end that the verdicts might be downgraded to lighter articles, allowing the law enforcers to escape punishment. The prosecution's stance was unexpected. However, the relatives' faith in justice was lost. A shocking photo fell into their hands, showing a man who looked strikingly like Vlad Kanyus. On November 8th, a man reported that the prosecutor's office of the Rostov region informed him about the pardon of the murderer of their daughter. According to the prosecutor's office's response, Kanyus was pardoned in April 2023 and sent to the SVO zone in Ukraine. Vera's father, Evgeny Pekhteleva, whose daughter Vladislav brutally killed, reported that the executioner of his daughter was not only amnestied, but also exempted from paying compensation in the amount of 6.5 million rubles. The sentence required him to pay compensation for moral damage of 4 million rubles to the victims, 1.5 million to the parents, 1 million to her uncle, and an additional 200,000 rubles to the state for court-appointed lawyers, added the girl's father. Thus, the cruel murderer was set free, and if he survives in the SVO zone, he will return to normal life. Relatives began to fear that the released criminal might also harm them. Write what you think about this story. It's really important for me to know your opinion.